So continue with our styles. Another thing that is super important is in it's probably on the brand guidelines or not. Like we just saw on the colors is the fonts. Uh, it is super important to be able to understand how to choose a font, how to use typography properly, because lots of users have this memory of a beautiful font, beautiful calligraphy, or amazing typography that a product or a website or landing page has. And it's very common for people to say, "Hey, remember that website with amazing typography, with such a beautiful font, etc." But we also have to have some things in mind when we talk about typography, which is probably two main things: accessibility and readability. And you can find on the web that readability is also part of accessibility, and they're not wrong when they say that, because imagine if you see like a beautiful handwrite uh, font family. It is amazing, but only with bigger text. When you use for like a small text, you can't read anything, right? And same with like pretty straightforward font families. Uh, you have like amazing, beautiful fonts like Helvetica, Poppins, or Inter, Roboto. They are very good for paragraph. They're very amazing for readability. But when you use in like bigger sizes for titles or even like for backgrounds, it's kind of boring, right? Because they're too straight. So moving on with our uh, styles, let's talk about fonts, typography, right? So some things that we need to understand here. We have serif fonts and we have sans serif fonts. We have handwritten. We have a bunch of types of font families. We're not gonna cover this here because this is probably like a huge topic just to talk about typography. Here in the course, we're gonna summarize, of course, because this is an introduction to UI design. We're gonna summarize the basics on how to choose a font, where you're gonna find good fonts, and the basic stuff. So starting with font sizes, like I was just saying, you have to take readability and accessibility into account here, because depending on the size of the font you're going to choose, and especially when we talk about responsiveness, mobile, desktop, tablet, or even like Apple Watches or any other smartwatch, the font size plays a key role here. And when we are working with engineers, we also need to uh, put them into the loop, because there's some structure on the code that we need to follow, like semantics. For example, we have H1, H2, H3, H4, H5. In some cases, we don't have the five headings. H here stands for heading. And this is like a tag on CSS, so we can create on code the diversity of styles. So H1 is the biggest style you can have in your project. H2, H3, so on and so forth. Like you start working on the size. Then you have paragraph. You can have the CTA label. You can have hint text. You can have error message. You have the input labels. You can play around with like other font sizes, but you also need, like I just mentioned, you also need to connect with the engineers to understand how are they going to build this on CSS. how the code uh, will interpret this. Because imagine if you on Figma or Framer or Webflow or Sketch, uh, you name your font styles in a way, and on the code, because of the semantics and the syntax of each code, each language, it is different. It would be like a huge mess, because they would say like, hey, what is your H1? And you have like, I don't know, title large, title medium, title small, title extra small, instead of H1, H2, H3, H4. It'd be a little hard, right? So you have to figure this out team wise, because it's super important. I have a preference to keep this like H1, H2, H3, H4 paragraph. Sometimes I use B, or sometimes I use body, depend on the developer that is working with me. I use CTA label or button, hint text, error message, input label, or just input, or just label, depends. The second thing about fonts is the font weight. And here, anyone who ever used, I don't know, Word, Microsoft Word, knows this. You have bold, you have regular, you have light, right? But some fonts uh, have other weights, and this vary from font family to font family. Depends on the typography designer who created the font. You can have thin, extra light. I even had like one font that was extra thin. It was beautiful, but up until I think like 24. 16 was like terrible to read. So the most common right now is have thin, extra light, light, regular, medium, semi bold, bold, extra bold, and black. Black is the thickest you can have. But again, that will depend on your styles, on your visuals, on your uh, like your interface, and then communicate that with the devs. Next, font style, and you can you can play safe here just by having normal, italic, underline for links. Strike through is also used for links when you're like, maybe you're in the active page, or the pages that you already visit, the links that you already visit. You have this strike through to indicate the user, okay, you check this, you already seen this, right? And the underline, it also helps on accessibility and on screen readers. Every time you have the underline, is an indication that you have a link. And you can have that on the active state or just on hover. When you hover something, you add the overline. But like normal, italic, that's pretty straightforward. Uh, and next is font color. And font color is just that, the colors you add to the fonts. Again, don't forget about design principles. When we talk about contrast, font color needs contrast. Contrast. Oh, font colors needs contrast, because this is how you're going to be able to read uh, your text in the interface. So if you're using like a light background, don't use light gray. Don't use light color, because it'll be terrible. You won't have enough contrast. So again, uh, fonts are very important in your project. So to be able to select beautiful fonts, I like to go to Google Fonts. This is like there's plenty of websites you can find great fonts, but why I use Google Fonts, because those are ready for anything. accessibility, code, Figma, Photoshop, Sketch, Framer. Uh, it's like probably like the default for any designer to use Google Fonts, and it's pretty amazing. Like you have here, let's open filters, uh, panels here, tons of options, and then and guidelines around fonts. You can type here. Let's see here. Here goes the title. Very generic copy. I can change the size here, and here you have like rebuttal, noto, Tauri, uh, Open Sans, Montserrat, Poppins, Lato, Inter, um, Oswald. Those are like the major fonts, the most common fonts you find out there. Uh, Here's a good serif font. Playfair is also like very, very used. Uh, and here you can change stuff like only serif fonts or only sans serif. You can select display or serif handwritten. Simple as that. And if you go to the font, you can see here the different weights. So this is like regular 400, regular 400 italic. This font in particular only have regular or italic. You can see here examples of different paragraphs, titles. Let's check here. Let's remove that. Let's use only serif, but not handwritten. Monospace, so like each font has the kerning very well balanced. So let's see here, like Noto. Noto is an amazing font. So we have like all the weights, different options for paragraphs. Again, let's use display. What we have here. No, let's remove everything. Let's go for Poppins. Poppins is one of my favorites today. It's the font that you are seeing in everything related to this course. I'm using Poppins and Inter. So I have like thin italic, extra light. The list goes on, and you can see here. Okay, all right. They're like for paragraph size 21, size 16. It's amazing. You can totally read that. So you'll be able to study this. You'll be able to go over everything for every font, and you have the get font. So you're gonna download that. You're gonna install, and depending if you're using PC or Mac, there's different ways to install the font. And then once you load Figma or whatever design tool you're using, that font will be installed. And so right now it's time for us to put that in practice. Let's jump into our project and start creating our styles and start adding our like typography taste to our project. Okay. So here on Figma, we have our wireframe that we created already. We have our color styles that we saw last lesson. And now it's time for us to create our font styles. So right now we have here the page title, we have the product name, we have product description, we have some labels, we have a CTA label. In everything here in this wireframe is using Lato. Is a very basic font to start, but like let's start to add some fluffy. I don't like Lato, like I mentioned. Right now, the two fonts that I'm using the most are Poppins and Inter. Let's see how it works here with this. So for title, let's go for Intern. Size 16, bold, maybe too strong. So maybe let's say medium, semi-bold. Semi-bold is good. So to create a style is pretty simple, like we did with the colors. We hit the waffle menu, we hit the plus, and this I can totally use page title. You can add a description if you want to be very thorough with this, but I don't even I have like my file very well organized. I don't create descriptions for this, so create style. So even if I come here and select page title, boom. But this is not what I want. So I break the style. This needs to be, I don't know, maybe 32. It's already intern, but let's use pop-ins here to oh, nice. But maybe bold, yeah, 32. Let's see, 40. Probably it's too big because if you have like a longer, it will break. So let's bring this to here to be same size. Uh, Here we can say that we're gonna truncate after a while. So this means that sneaker name goes here, and if I hit enter, we have the three dots. Uh, so if I remove the name here, the word name, it goes like this. Okay, we can maybe edit this later. So let's create a style. And here is where I will add this as my H1. Enter. Now I have here two text styles. Let's sort this. The H1 be the first. Then I have my description, which I also use pop-ins. 16, 24. Let's hit 20. 24. Let's leave it auto. It's the line spacing. This is the paragraph spacing, and we don't need to change that. The kerning is good. Everything's good. Everything's good. Okay. So this will be my paragraph. Here, label. Since I used intern for my page title, I think it makes sense for every title, every label to use inter as well. So here let's use semi-bold 16. Although they are pretty much the same, so page title is 16. Instead of using page title here for the label, I will create another style with the same settings. So labels. Just because if I decided to change the labels, I won't match with the page title and vice versa. So it is important that sometimes you have duplicated styles, although they have the same settings, but not to mess around. The sizes here, I'll leave as is on this wireframe because on the visuals, we're probably going to change that. Here, I will use labels as well. So I applied here. And now for the CTA, I will also use inter because it's also a label. So let's add inter. But I think I'm going to go bold, maybe capitalize. I don't know. Let's create it that way, and if we need to change later, we will change. So I'll have a button, just button. Boom, there you go. So now we have our styles here, correct? So far we don't need H2, H3, H4. We can probably create this on the fly once we move forward with our project. So that's pretty the basic on how we create our style, how we organize our styles. And once we get back here to the practice lesson and start visually exploring our styles, we can maybe change, edit, add more, so on and so forth. Okay, see you next lesson.